Welcome to my YouTube channel, dear FR students. So, today we are going to start our day 3, part 3 of our revision series. So, I hope you have watched revision series 1 and 2. And if you have missed it out, I'm mentioning the link of both part 1 and part 2 in this video. So, guys, please, utilize this and, I hope that will help you out to revise all the concepts of FR in just one go. And before the examination, 2 days or 3 days before the examination, this crisp revision will help you to memorize all the important concept. Guys, just remember one thing, it's not the detailed description, it's just about, to memorize you guys about some important concepts. So in case, you want to revise deeply, you will have to follow Study Hub or any of the study texts that could be, Kaplan, BPP, or Becker. So, whatever you want to follow. So, yes, let's start with today's session, chapter number 8 from other standards, right? So, first of all, we are going to start IAS 8 accounting policies, change in accounting estimates and errors. So, we knew that the accounting policies are rules and principle applied by an entity which specify how the transactions are reflected in financial statement, and every company have to apply somehow some accounting policies in their financial statement, right? So that could be different from one company to another company, so we have to mention whichever policy we are following. So when IFRS offers a choice of accounting policy, select the policy which will result in relevant and reliable information. So whenever there is a choice that yes, I want to apply this policy or not. So yes, I have to, apply the policy which will give me benefit over the, other areas. So yes, change in accounting policy is only allowed if the required by the standard. As a result, in the more reliable and relevant information. So yes, we can change the accounting policy. See, that can be possible, but yes, if that change in that change in accounting policy will result in the more reliable and relevant information. And yes, guys, remember one thing, that is the most important thing, that is change in accounting policy should be applied retrospectively. That means we have to apply that change from the previous year itself, not from the कमिंग ईयर. सो व्हेनेवर अगर हम कोई चेंज करने जा रहे हैं तो वो पीछे से होगा, बट यस अगर वो चेंज पॉसिबल नहीं है तो ऑब्वियसली जिस ईयर से चेंज लेके आ रहे हैं वी हैव टू मेक चेंज फ्रॉम दैट ईयर ओनली, राइट? सो अब इसके लिए व्हाट वी हैव टू डू इज तो द एंटिटी एडजस्ट द ओपनिंग बैलेंस ऑफ ईच अफेक्टेड कंपोनेंट ऑफ इक्विटी. Comparative figures are presented if the new policy has always been applied, because we knew that के financial statement में जो हमारी information होती है we present that with the help of कि by showing comparative figures also. So पिछले साल की फिगर्स को भी ऐसे शो करेंगे जैसे कि वो चेंज कभी था ही नहीं. दैट मीन्स वो शुरू से ही फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग, फ्रॉम द इनिशियल पीरियड, ऑल द थिंग्स वर जस्ट लाइक द सेम. So, accounting estimates, accounting estimates or policy may various students get confused, guys. They both are different. Accounting estimates are, based on the judgment. They are based on the, uncertainty basically. So, like, जैसे कि हम example लेते हैं, change in depreciation method, that is accounting estimation, but we are applying depreciation in our financial statement, that is my accounting policy. So somehow student got confused and this question is repetitively asked. So I hope you now understand the difference between accounting estimates and accounting policy. And yes, accounting estimates are defined as a monetary amount that involve degree of measurement uncertainty. So changes in accounting estimate has been applied prospectively by including the statement of P&L and OCI for the current period or any future period that are also affected. So जब कभी भी policy का change करना है, we have to apply the change of policy from the retrospectively, and change in accounting estimate is always prospectively, that means from the coming year itself. Now, next term is prior period errors. Name से ही पता चल रहा है that prior period, that means from the previous periods. So prior periods errors are the misstatement or omission in the financial statement of the prior period which result in the accurate and not reliable information being made available. So that is just because of the previous year period, and due to that my financial statement are not showing the correct information, not showing the reliable information. So material prior period error should be corrected retrospectively. Opening balance of equity comparative figure should be adjusted to correct the error. So obviously, if we have to, make any adjustment, so yes, opening balance of equity comparative figures, we will adjust them to show the correct errors, right? कि ये इसका correct treatment क्या होना चाहिए था. Now we have the another standard which is IFRS 13 fair value measurement. Guys, इस standard में बहुत ज्यादा कुछ नहीं है. Basically in previous some standards we use the word fair value. So वो fair value हमने कैसे लेनी है, ये just हमें उसके regardingly guide कर रहा है that yes कि fair value price कौन सा होगा and how to take that fair value price. So yes, it is the price that would be received to sell an asset or pay to transfer a liability in orderly transaction between the market participant at the measurement date. That means आज की डेट में, आज के टाइम पे to purchase something or to sell something, what price will be paid and received for that particular transaction. So yes, for that particular price we have to follow the hierarchy, right? The hierarchy consists of three levels. Level one is for the unadjusted level of the quoted price in the active market. Active market जहां पर वो transaction daily base पे सेल और परचेज हो रही है for the similar type of items, right? बिल्कुल आइडेंटिकल टाइप्स ऑफ आइटम्स. लेवल टू क्या होते हैं, जो लेवल वन में कवर नहीं होते, वी कंसीडर देम इन लेवल टू. सो दीज आर द कोटेड प्राइस ऑफ एसेट एंड लायबिलिटी फॉर सिमिलर आइटम इन एन एक्टिव मार्केट. अब लेवल टू वालों में हमें क्या करना होता है, समहाउ टू द एक्सटेंड हमें कुछ एडजस्टमेंट करनी पड़ती है एंड देन वी गेट द प्राइस. एंड लेवल थ्री क्या होते हैं, जो लेवल वन में भी नहीं आते, टू में भी आते, देन दे कम टू लेवल थ्री एंड दे आर बेस्ड ऑन द बेस्ट assumption, right? They are not similar, they are not identical, and yes, we consider a judgmental price for these transactions, for these assets and liabilities. So yes, fair value of principal market to be considered. If principal market is not available, then the most advantageous one. So yes, we assume that कि yes, जो ये transaction होती हैं, they are on the best available prices. Everyone consider the fair price जो कि उनको सबसे ज्यादा profitable suit होगा. Now we have one more easy standard, that is IS2 inventory. So they are talking about the closing inventory. So yes, initial measurement is always on cost. Cost के regarding भी हम previous standards में भी पढ़ चुके हैं that वो सारे खर्चे जो कि उस transaction को उस present location में condition में लेके आने के लिए वो सारे खर्चे हमने include करने हैं. So yes, at the end of reporting period, that means at the closing time, inventory is valued at lower of कॉस्ट और एनआरवी. सो बेसिकली हमने क्लोजिंग स्टॉक जो है किस पे दिखाना है, राइट? सो कॉस्ट और एनआरवी, एंड एनआरवी वी न्यू दैट फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल. सो ये मेरा इन्वेंट्री का स्टैंडर्ड है, इससे ज्यादा इसमें कुछ नहीं है. एंड वी हैव थ्री मेथड्स इन आवर करिकुलम. Unit cost method, when we have big units which are distinguishable, तो वहां पर हम unit cost method लेते हैं. first in first out method, that is FIFO method, जहां पर हमारे पास perishable items होते हैं, we consider the FIFO method. And we have weighted average method when goods are interchangeable. So yes, next is our IS 41 agriculture. So they are talking about the agriculture and agriculture related assets, which assets are covered and which produce are covered under agriculture standards. So IS 41 biological asset, that means living plant or anyone covered under IS 41. Harvested product from any plant covered under IS 2. So basically ये क्या कहना चाह रहे हैं कि yes, कोई living plant और animals जो होते हैं, they are covered under IS 41. And yes, when that produce is separated from that plant, जैसे कि if we have apples on apple tree, till then they are on the apple tree, they are covered under IS 41. Whenever we pluck them, we stock them out, so वो हमारे IS2 inventories में cover हो जाएगा. And yes, bearer plants, that means the plants which give us that produce for more than one accounting year, they are covered under IS 16 because we will be using them in our business purpose. And yes, land is not a biological asset, so land को हम IS 16 PPE में cover करते हैं. So whenever we have suppose forest, तो हम forest की land को अलग से देखेंगे, trees को अलग से consider करेंगे while calculation of agriculture के assets की valuation. Now, if we have to consider ki how to recognize these biological assets, so the terms which were required, uh, the conditions which were required in the recognition of normal assets, certain conditions are same. Like it is probable that future economic benefit will flow to the entity from the asset. We knew that ki us asset se in the coming period we will get some future sort of benefits. So that is covered under my definition of biological asset, and I have the control of asset as like in the definition of assets. And cost or fair value can be measured, so because I have to show in financial statement, so I should know at what valuation I have to show that. And measures at fair value less cost to sell, any gain or loss is transferred to the statement of P&L. So I will be measuring that at cost or fair value less cost to sell. So if there is any gain or loss, I will be transferring that to statement of P&L. If market value is not available, then biological asset to be measured at cost less accumulated depreciation. So if I can't get the market value for the purpose of fair valuation, then I can choose the cost model. Otherwise, I will have to choose the fair valuation model. This is, one of those exception I told you that in most of the cases for the valuation of assets, we are choosing the cost model for the initial recognition, but this is one of those exception case we are choosing, we are giving priority to fair valuation instead of cost model in the first go, right? So yes, biological assets में क्या क्या आता है? These items like cattle, sheep, cotton plant, sugarcane, biological related plants and animals. And yes, agriculture produce, that means the produce which we receive from the biological assets like milk, wool, harvested cotton, the produce which we get from these biological assets. And yes, these produce like some of the items are outside the scope of IS 41, like cheese, carpets. That means the processed biological produce is covered outside the scope of biological asset. So guys, these were some, few easy standard which were covered under, chapter number 8. Now, let's jump toward the next chapter, which is financial assets and financial liability. So, first of all, guys, you must know the financial instrument. Financial instrument क्या होते हैं? It's any contract that give rise to financial asset of one entity and financial liability or equity instrument of another entity. So, basically, एक पार्टी का जो है वो एसेट होगा, दूसरी पार्टी का वो क्या होगा? फाइनेंशियल लायबिलिटी या फिर इक्विटी इंस्ट्रूमेंट होगा. So yes, let's start with financial asset first, right? So उसकी अगर मैं बात करूं, so financial assets क्या होते हैं? That is the contractual right to receive cash or other financial assets, because like trade receivable, cash. These are the some examples of financial assets. Yes, and yes, I will get these assets under a favorable conditions, and equity instrument or debt instrument of another entity. Basically, they are also covered under my financial assets definitions. So yes, investment in equity instrument is accounted for as. So if I have to recognize the equity instrument. So there are two methods to recognize the equity instrument of another entity. Basically, so fair value through P&L and fair value through OCI. So yes, there are two methods, and investment in debt instrument are accounted for as. So basically, if I have to show the debt instrument of another entity, so वहां पर भी मेरे पास आगे क्या मेथड्स आ जाएंगे? आगे उसमें थ्री मेथड्स आ जाएंगे. देखो, इक्विटी में मेरे पास क्या है? P&L एंड OCI वाला मेथड. एंड डेथ इंस्ट्रूमेंट के केस में मेरे पास एक और एडिशनल मेथड आ जाता है, दैट इज अमोर्टाइज कॉस्ट, दैट इज to hold till maturity and the maturity or receive all the cash flows from the instrument. Next is fair value through P&L, and the third one is fair value through OCI. That means I have to hold till maturity, but yes, if I want to sell for higher gain, I can sell that if there is an option. Now, next is derecognition. So yes, I can derecognize when all the contractual right to have expired or financial asset is sold. Basically, asset तब तक ही दिखाना है ना जब तक मेरे पास right है, like in previous standard. So whenever I lost that right, I can derecognize that asset, and gain or loss transfer to P&L. So अगर इसका कोई gain or loss होगा तो I will transfer that to P&L. And yes, debt instrument के केस में होगा balance होगा in OCI transfer to P&L, right? P&L equity instrument. Balance in OCI is not transferred to P&L. राइट। तो ये बेसिकली इक्विटी इंस्ट्रूमेंट के केस में जो होता है, मेरा बैलेंस जो होता है P&L में ट्रांसफर नहीं होता है। बट यस, डेट इंस्ट्रूमेंट के केस में मेरा अगर OCI के पास बैलेंस पड़ा होगा तो वी कैन ट्रांसफर दैट टू P&L. Now let's talk about the equity instrument, basically financial liability. They both are, kind of opposite. एक पार्टी का एसेट है, दूसरी पार्टी की liability है. So yes, contractual obligation to deliver cash or other financial assets. So yes, initially the liability is measured at fair value or PV of the future cash flows less cost of issuing. तो मैंने अगर उसको दिखाना है तो यस, मैं उसको प्रेजेंट वैल्यू की टर्म्स में कि यस कितना मेरी पॉकेट से आउटफ्लो होगा, आई विल बी शोइंग दैट इन सच अ फॉर्म. Subsequently, fair value through P&L or and amortize cost using effective, right? So this is my subsequent treatment. So de-recognize when the obligations are discharged, cancelled or expired. So whenever I have discharged that obligation, or due to some other reasons that obligation is cancelled or expired, or if there is any gain or loss, that gain or loss is transferred to my P&L. So guys, this was a treatment of financial assets and financial liability. Now let's get into deep. Let that what is amortized cost and equity instrument, compound instrument. So amortized cost में मुझे क्या करना है, initial value plus effective interest less interest rate इस valuation पे show करना है. We can create a chart for that. इफेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट रेट कौन सा रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट होगा, दैट इज द मार्केट रेट ऑफ द सिमिलर इंस्ट्रूमेंट. गाइस, दिस क्वेश्चन इज टू बी प्रेजेंटेड इन फॉर्म ऑफ चार्ट. यू कैन चेक to the study hub, or your practice platform, or your exam kit for the purpose of calculation. I'm just giving you just brief idea about the concept over here. Now the financial liability and asset can be offset when they will be settled in net of basis. Next is the equity instrument. Any contract that evidence the residual interest in the asset of any entity after deducting all its liabilities. So whenever we discharge all the liabilities, so I will get the equity instrument. Now next is the compound instrument. Has the characteristics of both equity and liability. Then liability is equal to PV of repayments, discount at market rate or similar instrument without conversion. Equity instrument, cash proceeds from equity instrument, वैल्यू ऑफ लाइबिलिटी. सो ये हमारे इक्विटी इंस्ट्रूमेंट और लाइबिलिटी वाले जो है हम कंपाउंड इंस्ट्रूमेंट में करते हैं. सो यस, इन केस ऑफ माय प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स वी हैव टू टाइप्स, राइट. सो इरिडीमेबल प्रेफरेंस शेयर्स जो कि कभी भी रिडीम नहीं होंगे, दैट मींस आई डोंट हैव एनी ऑब्लिगेशन टू मेक पेमेंट आइदर ऑफ कैपिटल और डिविडेंड. So इसलिए I will be treating them as an equity. But if they are redeemable, so that means I have the obligation. So I have to repay them fixed amount or cumulative dividend. So they are my obligation. So I will be treating them as a liability. Next is the financial assets. So financial assets में equity instrument is held at fair value through OCI. So you guys, you have to see the treatment in the questions. वो question से आपको idea मिलेगा, and then try to solve in such a way. So equity instrument is held at fair value through OCI when it is not held for trading. Yes, I don't have the option. I'm not keeping it for the trading purpose. Irrecoverable choice for this designation upon the initial recognition of asset, initially recognized at fair value plus transaction cost. Next is my debt instrument. Debt instrument is held at fair value through OCI when initially recognized at fair value plus transaction cost. Interest income is calculated using the effective rate of interest in the same way as the amount that would have been recognized in the P&L if the unamortized cost. Now, next is the loss allowance impairment of financial asset is allowed. So, if the loss is low, then the loss allowance कितना होगा? 12-month expected credit P&L. If loss is significant, तो loss amount क्या होगा? Lifetime expected credit loss. और impairment can be reversed and accounted for in the statement of P&L. So guys, ये थोड़ा सा इनके बारे में डिटेल में था. You don't have to memorize so deeply, but yes, इसमें से जो क्वेश्चन जो होते हैं amortized cost के बेसिस पे आ जाता है, and practically somehow 2 to 4 marks का we can expect from this chapter, so we can't leave this chapter. So next is factoring of receivables. So similar to this concept we have covered in our class +2 or graduation curriculum. So factoring of receivable is where when one company transfer its receivable balance to another organization, that organization is known as factor for management and collection of receivable and advance on the value of those receivable in return. So basically, I need money. I don't, have the option, but yes, I knew that I have to receive money from XYZ person after 2 months. So I came to you that yes, I will receive certain amount of money from Mr. XYZ after 2 months. Collect that money on my behalf from him after 2 months. But yes, I am giving you the document and till today I need some amount of money. Give me the 90% or 95% of the money which I am, going to get from Mr. XYZ. So you will be giving me money, the 95% or 90%, whatever the terms between you and me are decided. In today's time, you will get 2 months. After 2 months, the full amount. I will get money today. You are happy. I am happy. You are just advancing me money in the form of, factor. So this is just about factoring, right? So next is we have IS 32. So this relate to classification of financial instrument and their presentation in financial statements. So IS 32 deal with this. IFRS 7 deals with the disclosure of financial instrument in financial statement. And IFRS 9 deals with the how the financial year instruments are measured and when they should be recognized. So ये जो है तीन standard in financial instruments से relate करते हैं. Let's talk about the disclosure. So, the carrying amount of each class of financial instruments should be recorded at either on the face of statement of financial position or within the note. So basically, I have to show in the form of carrying amounts on the face या फिर मैं उसको क्या करूंगी notes में दिखाऊंगी. An entity must also disclose कोई भी income, कोई भी expense, कोई भी gain कौन सी वाली फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट से है, P&L में है या OCI में है या फिर नोट्स में मैं उसको दिखाऊंगी. बेसिकली आई हैव टू मेक प्रॉपर डिस्क्लोजर, right? So an entity must also make disclosure regarding of the nature extent of the risk faced by the entity. This must cover the entity's exposure to risk, management objectives and policy for managing those risks and any changes during the year. So basically कोई अगर risk है, I have to disclose that also in my financial statement. सो गाइज ये जो था हमारा थोड़ा फाइनेंशियल इंस्ट्रूमेंट का स्टैंडर्ड था. इसको आई वुड रिकमेंड थोड़ा सा आप डिटेल में पढ़ लें बिकॉज सम हाउ सम स्टूडेंट्स स्ट्रगल इन दिस स्टैंडर्ड. सो माय रिकमेंडेशन वुड बी टू जस्ट just give it a short reading from study text as well because this is kind of thoda sa complex for some students. Now, let's jump towards the next standard, that is chapter number 10, foreign currency. This is, one of the easiest standard, which I have, seen in my, FR or SBR journey. So yes, I is 21. So functional currency, first of all. So currency of the primary economic environment where the entity operates, that is my functional currency. And in other words, it is a currency in which majority of the transactions of the entity take place. Basically, functional currency we can get the idea from the name itself that yes, which we do function, which we do operate, in which the transaction are being made. So that is my functional currency. So the presentation currency name itself tells that the currency in which the entity prepare its financial statement. So जिस वाली currency में मैं अपनी financial statement prepare करूंगी, that is my presentation currency. And that could be the case कि ये दोनों जो है हमारे पास same है. Right. Next is the historical rate. So historical rate is the rate in place at the date of the transaction and it's reflected as a spot rate of that particular day. So yes, जिस भी date में हम transaction करेंगे, that is मेरा historical rate. Now closing rate, name itself as the rate of the reporting date. Average rate, the rate throughout the accounting period that is used whenever there is not so much change in the rate of exchange. They are not heavily changing. Then we can use that average rate. So so let's talk about the treatment. Initially, a foreign currency transaction should be converted at the spot rate. First recognition on the date of transaction that should be on the spot rate. मतलब जिस दिन transaction हुई थी उस दिन के rate पे मैं उसको financial statement में दिखा दूंगी. And at the date of settlement, so the cash should be converted using the spot rate and any difference would be accounted for in the statement of P&L. अब मैं इसको सेटलमेंट डेट पे क्या करूंगी, दो सेटलमेंट डेट पे जो रेट दिख रहा होगा दैट मीन्स उस दिन का स्पॉट रेट होगा, मैं अपने फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट उस दिन के रेट पे दिखा दूंगी. एंड इफ देयर इज एनी गेन और लॉस आई विल बी transferring that gain or loss difference into my P&L account. So yes, at the year end, foreign currency transaction must be treated accordingly. So जब कभी भी year end होता है तो what I do, if there is a non-monetary item like inventory, investment, non-current assets, so I won't change that item. I will be showing that at a historical cost. And if there is a monetary item, right, like cash, receivables, payables, loans, so I will retranslate that using the closing rate. Means I will be changing that on the date of that पर्टिकुलर ट्रांजेक्शन, मतलब कि ट्रांजेक्शन के डेट का स्पॉट रेट लेना है और उसका जो डिफरेंस होगा दैट शुड बी ट्रांसफर टू माय P&L, आइदर गेन और लॉस जो भी है वो मेरा P&L में जाएगा. So now, next is the treatment of exchange differences. If the exchange difference relate to the trading transaction, it is disclosed within the other operating income or expenses. So basically, if it is relate to my trading, business से relate है तो obviously फिर business से relate है तो मैं उसको operating income और expenses में दिखाऊंगी. But yes, it is not related to non-trading. It's related to non-trading transaction. Basically, business से relate नहीं है. So it is disclosed within the interest received and similar income or finance cost. तो basically ये मैं income या फिर finance cost अलग से मैं नीचे से दिखा. So यही ज्यादा it's not very tricky standard. It's very easy standard. So now guys, we are done with the standard IS 21 foreign exchange rate. Now let's jump toward another standard, which is revenue. Guys, it's one of the important standard and it's very easy also. And you can expect this standard in your interview questions. And guys, even not only this standard, you can use these classes, these revisionary videos for the purpose of your interview whenever you are appearing for some kind of interview relating to accounting, or in case of you are appearing for audit paper as well. So for the purpose of audit also, you also need some basic uh, accounting knowledge, because being an auditor you have to check the financial statements. So you can use these video in that purpose also. Now guys, let's jump towards the next standard, which is chapter number 11, revenue, IFRS 15. So first of all, we knew that the revenue is the the highest income, right? The the major transactions are recorded in the revenue. So revenue is the income arising in the course of an entity normal trading और operating activities. Basically business से related होने वाली activity से आने वाला जो पैसा होता है that is मेरा revenue. In general, revenue is recognized when the performance obligation is satisfied. तो जब कभी भी मुझे revenue recognize करना है ना, so मैं कैसे करूंगी, जब मेरी performance obligation satisfied होगी. Although for this we have a 5-step approach also, we will be covering that later on. So yes, performance obligation कब satisfied होगा? Suppose if I have to transfer a goods, so when the risk and rewards is transferred or the control is transferred relating to that good, like if I have to deliver you a car, I have given you the documents, I have given you the keys, I have delivered you the car, or I have given you the control of that specific car, whatever the case, whatever the terms are decided between you and me, then I will be recognizing the revenue in respect of that particular car. So yes, in case of services, when the service is rendered, suppose if I am teaching you this FR course for the paid purpose basis, right? So when I delivered all the classes, whether you have not paid me, right? But I have done my part of obligation, I have delivered you all the lectures, then I can recognize the revenue. And if there is, a time bound contract that is related to 2 months period, I will be giving you certain amount of service, right? So if the time period has been expired, so that means I can recognize the revenue after that particular time period. So next is the 5-step approach of revenue recognition. So whenever we want to recognize the revenue, we have to consider these 5 steps. So first of all, identifying the contract, whether it that is related to particular goods or service, but what is the contract basically. Then identify the separate performance obligation. There might be the scenario that in particular contract we might have more than one performance obligation, like in case of bundled contract, like it's a contract merged with goods and services. Like in case of coaching industry, some institute also provide books along with the service of the coaching. So when the performance obligation is satisfied, we consider that particular contract fulfilled, right? So yes, first of all I have to identify what are the performance obligation, whether it's related to goods only, whether it's related to service only, or whether it relates to both of goods and services, right? So determine the transaction price. So I have to consider the transaction price. What is the price of that particular contract? Allocate the transaction price to the separate performance obligation. I have to allocate the transaction price to that particular performance obligation की उस obligation के ऊपर कितना जाएगा, goods का कितना है, service का कितना है. पहले मैंने देख लिया contract क्या है, then मैं देखूंगी performance obligation goods है या service है या दोनों है. देन गुड्स का कितना प्राइस है, टोटल हमारा ट्रांजेक्शन प्राइस कितना है, देन आई विल बी डिवाइडिंग दैट ट्रांजेक्शन प्राइस टू गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, एंड आई विल recognize revenue whenever the performance obligation is satisfied. When the services are discharged, when the goods are delivered, I will be recognizing the revenue. So transaction price means the consideration payable by the customer, which includes variable consideration, financial component, नॉन कैश कंसीडरेशन. सो बेसिकली फाइनेंशियल प्राइस में ये सारी चीजें ट्रांजेक्शन प्राइस में ये सारी चीजें कवर होने वाली है. वेरिएबल दैट मीन्स द कंसीडरेशन दैट कुड वेरी अपॉन सर्टेन कंडीशंस, वो भी हम इंक्लूड करते हैं. फाइनेंशियल कंपोनेंट भी इंक्लूड करते हैं, नॉन कैश कंसीडरेशन भी हम कंसीडर करते हैं. सो नेक्स्ट वी हैव स्पेशल असाइनमेंट. So consignment assignment, right? Repurchase agreement. This is often not recognized as sale, but as a secured loan against sales. Indicator that this should not be recognized as sale में include. Basically ये क्या होता है कि मैंने आपके साथ contract किया कि yes I am selling you this, but after particular time period मैं आपसे ये particular asset जो है sale purchase कर सकती हूँ. सो एंड मैं थोड़े कम प्राइस पे, मार्केट से प्रिवेलिंग प्राइस से कम प्राइस पे परचेज कर सकती हूँ. सो ऐसा हमारे बीच में कुछ टर्म्स डिसाइड हुआ. दैट मीन्स आई एम नॉट सेलिंग यू, आई एम नॉट गिविंग यू द कंट्रोल, बिकॉज आई हैव द राइट टू बाय दैट पर्टिकुलर एसेट बैक फ्रॉम यू आफ्टर सर्टेन पीरियड ऑफ टाइम एंड at my price, right? So that is not the sale, that is just loan. So अब वो कौन सी conditions हो सकती हैं जिससे I can identify that sale has never been happened, बिकॉज द सेल इज बिलो द फेयर वैल्यू. क्योंकि मार्केट में प्राइस चल रहा था 10 और मैंने आपको जो है सेल कर दिया 6 पे, तो सेल हुआ ही नहीं, राइट? ऑप्शन टू रिपर्चेज बिलो द एक्सपेक्टेड फेयर वैल्यू. परचेज मार्केट में प्राइस होने वाला है 20 एंड मैं आपसे परचेज कर रही हूँ 5 में, सो दैट इज ऑल्सो नॉट द केस ऑफ सेल. Entity continue to use that asset. I am using that asset, right? मैं ही उसको use कर रही हूँ. Entity continue to hold the majority risk and reward associated with the ownership of asset. कि उसकी value कम हुई, decline हुई, या फिर उसका कोई भी XYZ मुझे risk जो है वो मैंने अपने पास retain कर ली. And sale is bank और financial bank to financial financing company. So basically ये sale किसको हुई है, बैंक या financial company को हुई है. So that is also the the indicator कि ये सेल जो हुई ही नहीं है, right? So अब आगे चलते हैं. नेक्स्ट इज बिल एंड होल्ड अरेंजमेंट. सब्सटेंस ओवर लीगल फॉर्म यहाँ पर मुझे कंसीडर करनी होती है. So yes, accounting treatment in case of long-term contract. So whenever there is a long-term contract, so I have to consider the progress of control कि कितने परसेंट जो है कंट्रोल पास ऑन हो गया, उसके बेस पे जो है हम रेवेन्यू जो है रिकॉग्नाइज करते हैं. So we have two methods over here. One is output method, another is input method. For output method, but I will be following work certified divided by total contract price कि कितना काम certified हो गया और total contract कितने का था. और input method that means कि अब तक कितना खर्चा हो गया divided by contract की total estimated cost कितनी थी. And नाउ नेक्स्ट इज, अगर मैं इसी सिनेरियो में चल रही हूँ और आई हैव अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट और आई न्यू दैट द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इज प्रॉफिट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, सो आई विल बी रिकॉग्नाइजिंग द रेवेन्यू एज टोटल रेवेन्यू जितने का था इनटू परसेंटेज ऑफ कंप्लीशन, कितना परसेंट कंप्लीशन हो गया, और कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स में कितना दिखाऊंगी कि टोटल कॉस्ट कितनी थी इनटू परसेंटेज ऑफ कंप्लीशन। सो दिस इज फॉर द प्रॉफिटेबल कॉन्ट्रैक्ट। बट इफ द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट इज लॉस मेकिंग, तो मैं रेवेन्यू कितना दिखाऊंगी, जितना परसेंट का मतलब रेवेन्यू था उसका परसेंटेज ऑफ कंप्लीशन, एंड कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स इज ऑल्सो टोटल कॉस्ट एज अ परसेंटेज ऑफ कंप्लीशन, एंड प्रोविजन इज रिकॉग्नाइज फॉर द इंटायर लॉस अमाउंट। तो इफ देर इज लॉस, तो उस वाले सिनेरियो पे मुझे उसके लिए प्रोविजन भी है जो रिकॉग्नाइज करनी पड़ेगी। बट वेन एवर आई डोंट नो द आउटकम ऑफ द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, आई डोंट नो वेदर इट बी प्रॉफिटेबल और लॉस मेकिंग, सो आई विल बी रिकॉग्नाइजिंग द रेवेन्यू एज कॉस्ट इनकर्ड, राइट, और कॉस्ट ऑफ सेल्स में भी क्या दिखाऊंगी, एज अ कॉस्ट, तो ना प्रॉफिट ना ही लॉस, उतना वाला हम दिखा देंगे। If the completion is percentage of the total life of the project, then the revenue and cost of sales will be cumulative. तो obviously ये जो हमने परसेंटेज देखनी है ना, तो ये टोटल लाइफ ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट में, तो फर्स्ट गो में अगर 30% हुआ तो 30%, नेक्स्ट गो में अगर 60% हुआ तो अप टू 60%, मतलब मैंने सारा वो देखना है, क्यूमुलेटिव देखना है, और 60% नहीं देखना है। Now, next is long term contract may result in contract asset और contract liability। अगर मुझे ये देखना है, ये स्टेटमेंट आपको बनाने के लिए भी आ सकता है guys। So contract asset, recognize the revenue before receiving the consideration, and in case of contract liability, consideration is received before the related revenue had been recognized। तो अब मैं इसकी कैलकुलेशन कैसे करूंगी, कॉस्ट टू डेट अब तक, यानी कि एक्चुअल खर्चा जितना हुआ, प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस वो कंसीडर करूंगी, लेस अमाउंट बिल्ड जितना हमने कर दिया, उससे मेरा क्या आएगा, कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एसेट या लायबिलिटी आ जाएगा। गाइस, यू विल बी हैविंग दिस इंफॉर्मेशन इन योर पेपर, सो जस्ट यस मेमोराइज दिस फॉर्मेट एंड यू अंडरस्टैंड कि किस में कौन सी अमाउंट आएगी, एंड यू आर गुड टू गो। So with that, we have completed another standard, which is our revenue. Now, next standard. So now next is chapter number 12, leases, and this is our IFRS 16 leases, guys. This is the last topic which we will be covering today's video. And in the next video, I will be covering with some more topics. But as of now, today I have shortage of time, so I will be winding up with leases only. So yes, now let's start with the leases. So leases. So lease क्या होता है? That we knew that it's a contract between the lessor and lessee, right? So इसमें क्या होता है? Lessor transfer a asset to lessee, right? And with the right of use, and इससे साथ क्या होता है? Lessee क्या करता है? Lessee को consideration देता है, and this consideration is known as lease rentals also basically. So basically lease क्या है? It's a contract that conveys the right of use of an underlying asset for a period of time in exchange of a consideration. Right of use of asset is the lessee's right, basically lessee's right to use an underlying asset over the lease term. The lessor provide the rights of use of asset in exchange of a consideration. Basically, I am giving you asset for particular period of time. I am the lessor and I am giving the asset to you. You are the lessee. You are giving me money for that asset, and in exchange, you are able to use that particular asset for a given time period between you and me, whatever time period we have decided. So yes, accounted for lessee point of view. So yes, in case of a lease reality, we have to consider the in the books of lessee. And yes, we have to follow the substance over form in case of lease accounting also. That means the commercial or economic reality, in case of that the owner is different, and the legal reality, the owner is different. So in the case of legal reality, the owner is lesser, right? But in commercial economic benefit term, the lessee is using that asset. So in that forms, the lessee is the owner. So yes, when we have to consider the lease accounting in the books of lessee, we have to consider few things. So first of all, what we will be doing, finance cost, that means the interest charged on the lease liability on an annual basis. Lease liability क्या होगा? That is the PV of all the lease payment. And whenever we have to consider about depreciation, depreciation is charge on the right of use of asset over the lease term. That means and for that purpose, for the depreciation purpose, we need the right of use of asset. The right of use of asset is the lease liability, right? But that is the PV of all lease payment plus all direct costs of the lessee which we have already incurred. So lease liability ke liye we can consider this table. This is very easy table and that will sort your life. So if the lease payment is made at the end of the period, guys, that could make a difference because the payment is made at the start of the period or at the end of the period. So because if we are making the payment at the end of the period, so obviously the balance is outstanding throughout the period. But if we are making the payment at the start of the period, that means the balance is not pending throughout the period. I have already made the payment at the beginning of that period. So yes, year one opening balance plus interest less payment, that is the closing balance. This closing balance would be the opening balance of next year. That is my format of lease liability in case of the payment is made at the end of the period. But whenever we are making the payment at the start of the period, so yes, the opening balance, then we will be deducting the payment first. Now this is my balance on which the interest is being charged because now this is my payment pending. So I will be charging interest on this amount. This is my closing balance. And now this closing balance is transferred to next year and I will deduct the payment and this will be my outstanding balance at the end of second year. So guys, this is the, lease liability chart. Consider that. Now, lease payment can be fixed variable or include a penalty payment, and asset can be transferred at the end of the lease term. In such a case, depreciation is charged over the total economic life. So basically, depreciation हम कहाँ पर लगाते हैं? Over the useful life period के ऊपर. So अगर वो asset जो है lease liability के lease period के बाद मेरे पास ही आने वाला है, तो that means I am using that asset for the whole lifetime period. So I will be charging the depreciation over the whole life of the asset, right? Economic life of the asset, basically. So lease term includes the extension period if it's reasonably certain to exercise. If I have contracted with you that the period of term is 3 years, but I have give you the option of 2 more years, and I knew that you are going to get that 2 extension period along with the 3 year time period, and that is certain, then I will be considering that the yes time period is not 3 years but it is now 5 years. So when the lease payment is done, then the liability is reduced. Obviously, if I have made a payment to you, right, and I am the lessee, right, so yes, the liability has been reduced because I was supposed to pay you 10. Now out of that 10 I have already paid you 3, so now the liability is 7. So if the revaluation method and IS 16 followed for the entire class of asset, the lease asset is presented in that class, then the revaluation to be applied to the lease asset also. Basically, if we have already covered that, the revaluation model if adopted if in one case, right? So for that entire class of assets are to be supposed to be have the same method of all the asset, right? So अगर मैं एक एसेट के ऊपर रिवैल्यूएशन मॉडल लगा रही हूँ चाहे आई 16 में, सो उस वाले सिनेरियो में क्या होगा? अगर वो एसेट जो है लीज अकाउंटिंग में आ रहा है तो भी उस पे जो है रिवैल्यूएशन मॉडल अप्लाई होगा. So yes, a contract can have both lease and non-lease component. Create a distinction and amount accordingly, or account for it completely as a lease asset if bifurcation is difficult. So अगर एक lease asset component है, एक non-lease asset component है, तो पहले मैं उसको separate करूंगी. But yes, if the separation is not possible, then what I will be doing कि मैं उसको फिर सारा का सारा ही लीज में मान लूंगी. अब रीअसेसिंग द लीज लायबिलिटी, इफ रिवाइज डिस्काउंटिंग रेट हो रहा है या फिर मेरी लीज लायबिलिटी में चेंज हो रहा है या फिर मेरे पास ऑप्शन है टू परचेज द अंडरलाइंग एसेट, तो उस वाले सिनेरियो में उसकी लीज टर्म को मैं दोबारा से चेक करूंगी. अब in case of asset of low value asset or short life asset, so standard have given us such easy guideline that yes, in such a case, the recognize the lease payment in the statement of P&L on a straight line basis. उस वाले सिनेरियो में I don't need to create लीज लाइबिलिटी, राइट ऑफ यूज ऑफ एसेट, ऐसा सब ट्रीटमेंट करने की जरूरत नहीं है. सो इन दैट केस व्हाट आई विल बी डूइंग, लीज पेमेंट आर अकाउंटेड ऑन अ एनुअल टोटल लीज पेमेंट लीज टर्म. And if the asset is on a mid-year lease, so if the lessee is entitled into the middle of year, then depreciation and the interest to be calculated on a टर्म बेसिस. बेसिकली अगर साल के बीच में हम लीज में एंटर हो रहे हैं, तो मैं फिर टाइम बेसिस पे, प्रोपोर्शन बेसिस पे करूंगी. ओके, इस साल में हाउ मेनी मंथ्स आर कवर्ड अंडर द टर्म. Now, next is the sale and lease back. So yes, in case of a sale and lease back, I have to consider whether the transaction is sale or the transaction is not a sale. So yes, if the transaction is sale, so that means the seller, that is my lessee, opposite हो जाएगा obviously, measures the right of use of asset as a proportion of the previous carrying amount. मैं previous carrying account के base पे उसका right of use of asset मानूंगी. And प्रॉफिट जो मैं है कितना दिखाऊंगी, टू द एक्सटेंट ट्रांसफर टू द बायर लेसी. जितना मैं ऐसे ट्रांसफर करूंगी उतने बेसिस पे मैं प्रॉफिट जो है दिखाऊंगी. बट इफ द ट्रांसफर इज नॉट अ सेल, देन मैं उस ट्रांसफर को क्या कंसीडर करूंगी, एज अ लोन, एंड द सेलर लेसी कंटिन्यू टू रिकॉग्नाइज द एसेट यूज एंड फाइनेंशियल लायबिलिटी. तो दोनों सिनेरियो ऐसे होंगे दैट आई हैव टू कंसीडर कि सेल एक्चुअल में हुई है या नहीं हुई है. एंड वी हैव कवर्ड दिस कंसेप्ट अर्लियर ऑल्सो. So yes, for that purpose, if I have to calculate the value of right of use of asset, right, इस purpose में अगर मुझे right of use of asset की value निकालनी है, तो मैं क्या करूंगी, carrying amount into present value of the lease payment divided by the fair value. क्वेश्चन में ये अमाउंट गिवन होगी. गेन कैसे निकालूंगी, ओनली फॉर राइट सोल, जितना एक मैंने एसेट बेचा है उसके बेसिस पे ही मैं गेन जो है वो दिखाऊंगी. एंड गेन ऑन सेल कैसे होगा, टोटल गेन कितना हुआ, दैट मीन्स गेन रिटेन कितना हुआ उतने बेसिस पे. That is selling price of the asset less carrying amount minus total gain into PV of the lease payment divided by fair value. So I will be accounting for in such a way. So guys, ये concept, if you want to revise the question on the basis of this concept, it's very easy. You can try it from the study hub as well as exam kit. Now, I hope the session was helpful for you guys. Use this, revision for your, interview purpose, or your FR, or your AA, or your AAA paper accounting information. And I will be coming up with video session number 4 very soon. Thank you guys and good luck.